Toilets to full-blown fights. There's been a rise in the number of passengers behaving badly on planes.
An investigation by BBC Radio 5 Live found a fourfold increase in reports of so-called air rage incidents over the last 3 years.
Well, to discuss it, we're joined by 5 Live's Adrian Goldberg and Jamie Leggett, who has been a flight attendant for 17 years. Gents, good morning to you. Adrian, just talk us through these figures, because these are figures for 5 Live.
Yeah, this is something called mandatory occurrence reporting, MORs, and UK airlines have to tell the Civil Aviation Authority if there is any incident which endangers the plane or potentially endangers the plane, including its crew and other passengers. Now, in 2013, there were 85 of these incidents. 2014, it went up to 114 incidents. In 2015, it had gone up to 386 incidents in 1 year. So over a 3-year period, the number of these so-called air rage incidents had quadrupled.
Why do you think there's been such a big rise?
Well, many of the cabin crew that we've spoken to say that there has been an increase in the amount of alcohol and indeed drug-fuelled air rage incidents. I think in more than 150 of these incidents, alcohol was specifically cited as a factor. We know that on airside, very often in the bars and in the airport itself, there are fewer regulations around drinking. People can drink at 3-4 o'clock in the morning. But the effects of alcohol are exacerbated when you're in the air, and very often it's what happens down on the ground, which feeds into what then happens in terms of incidents.
And of course, airports aren't subject to licensing laws, are they? And in fact, it's the one place where it's socially acceptable to drink at any time of day.
And Jamie, you've been at the receiving end of all of this. Talk me through some of your experiences.
Yeah, when this happens on board the aircraft, it's actually horrible. You're going to work, we're looking after customers, taking them on their holiday, which ultimately is meant to be a nice experience. And then when people do either, have too much to drink inside the terminal or on board, it just erupts, and it's just not a nice place to be.
And if it's happening in the terminal building beforehand, that's very difficult for you to control, because clearly there are certain things you can do once those passengers are on board. But if they're coming to you already, having had quite a lot of drink already, it's very difficult for you to do anything about it.
Yeah, it's quite difficult for us, but our ground staff are very supportive. Within my airline, Jet2, we have patrols throughout the cabin, throughout the terminal building, speaking to people in the bars, handing out leaflets, just letting people know the consequences of actually having too much to drink.
We heard the Aviation Minister, Lord Ahmed, saying a few months ago that perhaps restricting the sale of alcohol at airports could be the answer. Do you think that's the solution?
Yeah, definitely. Recently, we've stopped selling alcohol before 8 o'clock. So actually, we've seen an improvement on board the aircraft, so people can't top up their alcohol that they've had from inside the terminal building. But I think from my point of view, it would be great if they didn't arrive in that state to begin with. It would be nice if the alcohol was restricted within that terminal.
Adrian, is this a British problem? It strikes me that it might be a cultural thing.
Well, partly, although we've seen figures from the IATA, the International Aviation Authority, and that shows as well that internationally there is a rising trend, not perhaps quite as pronounced as we've seen with UK airlines, but that this is a growing problem internationally as well.
Is it because more of us are flying and we're getting better at reporting it? I mean, there's an element of that involved here.
Possibly so, but I also think it's a cultural thing, and we've spoken to cabin crew who said to us that they sign up in order to serve people. They know they might have to be firefighters, they might have to sometimes be paramedics. What they never expected to do was have to become effectively nightclub bouncers in the air.
I mean, it's interesting, there was a study that came out a few months ago that said actually air rage is more likely to happen on flights where there's a first-class compartment, because it breeds that sort of resentment, and it's a version of mini-society, if you like, where if class inequality is exposed, there's social unrest.
I think people have said to me who've worked as cabin crew that there are two particular points of vulnerability. There are the destinations that are popular with stag and hen parties, people getting in the party spirit to places like Ibiza and Malaga a little bit too early on in their little weekend jaunt, but also then long distance flights, places like Las Vegas, seen as party destinations. You may be on flights where there is free alcohol anyway, and people, having paid a significant amount of money for their flight, have a sense of entitlement and they demand free booze.
Okay.
Gents, really good to talk to you. We're going to talk a little bit more about this a little later, but Adrian and Jamie, thanks very much for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Really
and of course, if you have experience, or perhaps you've been on a flight that was disrupted by bad behaviour, antisocial behaviour by passengers, please do get in touch. You can hear more on that story on BBC Radio 5 Live from 11 this morning.